Welcome to this channel, a channel that explores different activities in different parts of the world, but with more focus on Africa. If you have not subscribed to this channel, I request you to do so. Also, watch the various videos that you have done on various topical issues, like, comment, and also hit the notification bell so that whenever you do another a new video, you are notified. In today's video, we'll be looking at why cooking oil prices are on the rise. Cooking oil is a product that is used throughout the full industry, right from cooking to manufacturing of various products. Talk of biscuits, soap, toothpaste, ice cream, among others. You'll find that nearly half or 50% of them all packaged products that you find in your shops, in the supermarkets, are all made from cooking oil. So when the cost rises and the shortage happen, there's a knock-on effects. As we know, there are wide varieties of cooking oils from plant sources. We have olive oil, palm oil, soyabean oil, canola seed or canola oil, corn oil, peanut oil, and many other vegetable oil, as well as animal-based oils like butter and lard. In terms of where we get most of our oil, palm oil accounts for 58% of all the oil that is produced in the world. Then we have soybeans accounting for 14%. Sunflower oil accounts for 13%. Then you have the canola oil accounting for 7% of. So all these form 92% of the vegetable oil that is traded in the world markets. The remaining 8% comes from diverse locally important oils such as olive oil, cottonseed oil, peanut oil, safflower oil, and palm kernel oil. In terms of where this oil comes from, palm oil mainly comes from Indonesia and Malaysia, and also some African countries and other countries in South America. So these two countries, Indonesia and Malaysia, account for 92% of the total palm oil exports. Major soybean oil exporters include Argentina, which accounts for 46% of the global exports. Brazil accounts for 10%, and the European Union accounts for 8%. And the United States produces or exports 80%. Canada is the major exporter of canola oil, accounting for 58% of all the exports. Also, Russia accounts for 13% of all the canola oil that is exported. We have European Union 8%, Belarus 7%. All these are important exporters. Before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the global vegetable supplies had tightened due to a variety of factors. So even before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is being cited as one of the major causes of cooking oil prices to rise, given that Russia and Ukraine are two countries that produce most of the oil which comes from sunflower. So before these, there were problems. The prices of oil were increasing, and this was a result of several factors, including unfavorable weather conditions. There have been droughts in some parts of world, especially in South America and Canada. This constrained the supply of soybean and canola. Then you have the COVID-19. Then the demand due to biofuels, and then came the Ukraine invasion, then the Indonesia ban on exportation of palm oil. So all these factors have played a role in escalation of the cooking oil prices. And as you know, cooking oil is a product that is widely used in cooking. So with these shortages, then you expect some ripple effects. So adverse weather is one of the factor that has been quoted to have led to escalation of the cooking oil prices. We had droughts in South America and Canada, and these have constrained supplies of soyabean oil and canola oil respectively. In the past, the global market would see big supply shocks over every 5 to 7 years, but in the past 10 years, these have become much more frequent, with climatic conditions like drought, frost, and sometimes diseases affecting crops more often. In 2021, farmers in Canada, the biggest producer and exporter of canola oil, had a disastrous growing season after the temperature in the area soared to almost 50 degrees. The soyabean oil price is matching up at the moment due to the smaller harvests expected from growers in Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay, which accounts for more than 50% of the world supply. This after a severe drought. Last year, drought in Ukraine and Russia propelled sunflower prices to a 12-year high. Over the last couple of years, we have seen lots of crop problems all over the world. The high temperatures in Canada had a massive impact on canola production, and this had an impact on EU prices and prices all over, because these ripples travel across the world. So adverse weather, drought, frost, and even diseases, which come as a result of probably climate change. These have affected the production of various types of vegetable oil. Another factor is the growing demand for biofuel. Biofuel currently accounts for about 15% of the global demand for vegetable oil. This use, as countries seek to reduce their reliance on fossil fuels, has previously been blamed for pushing up the food prices. 50 to 60% of the canola grown in Europe and 60% of the palm oil imported by the region goes into biodiesel. Over the last 20 years, the increase in demand for biodiesel has stimulated production, but there is always going to be a crunch point where you get the debate over fuel versus food. So though shift from fossil fuels to biofuels is partly to blame, although it's a good thing, because countries or people are aiming at reducing emission of carbon, but this comes with a problem. High demand for biofuels is pushing up the food prices, so to be a hard balance. It's a challenge. On one side, we want to reduce the emission of carbon, but this measure ends up pushing the food prices high. There was an argument for temporary suspension in the use of edible oils in biodiesel due to the current crisis. This would have a dramatic impact on the availability of the food industry and also alleviate some of the pressures. So there has been that push that probably we should suspend the use of edible fuels in manufacture of biodiesel until the current crisis is solved. That will have an impact as far as the environment is concerned, but it will come to solve a bigger problem, because without food, then we have a bigger problem. The other factor is the Ukraine-Russia war. The Black Sea countries are large exporters of sunflower oil. Ukraine and Russia account for about 60% of the world population of sunflower oil, and the conflict has hit the supply is hard. Sunflower is one of the big four vegetable oils. It ranks behind palm oil, soyabean, and canola oil in that order. And with cut off supplies from these two major suppliers, which account for 60%, that's a big hit. So when the supply of one of the big four is interrupted, big four being the big four vegetable oils, palm oil, soyabean, we have seen that palm oil supply has been interrupted. Soyabean and canola oil has been interrupted by the drought. So when this interruption occurs, it triggers a scrub off to buy a substitute. The price of sunflower oil jumped 60% after the invasion of Ukraine. This had a knock-on effect on prices for other products, palm, rapeseed, and soyabean oil. The war has trapped millions of tons of sunflower oil earmarked for foreign buyers in Ukraine, causing a major supply shock. Overnight, there was a situation where the market could not offer because supplies were not coming from Ukraine and being processed or from Ukraine to other countries around the world. Ukraine has been unable to export 10 million tons of sunflower seed, 4 million tons of sunflower oil. During the crisis, 28% of the Ukraine national production of sunflower seed is grown in regions which are now affected by the Russian invasion. For vegetable oils, the most immediate global disruption came from export of sunflower oil. Important markets for these include India, the EU, China, which together account for 75% of what comes from Ukraine. Port closures have prevented roughly half of the sunflower oil that typically would have been exported from last harvest from leaving the country. The only alternative is more costly routes to the west through Romania and Poland. Processing facilities remain disrupted, and much of Ukraine's sunflower farming areas lies to the east, where much of the fighting is now occurring. Russian exports, as we know, are currently limited due to the effects of trade disruptions in the Black Sea and the implementation of the export quota by Russian authorities, and also the sanctions which are being put on the business transaction in this for this country. So Russian invasion already came to worsen a problem that was already bad. So this war, the Russian Ukraine war, has a great impact, not just for oil but even for other products. Wheat, Russian Ukraine are major producers of wheat, major exporters of wheat. That's why the prices of wheat has increased dramatically. Then we have COVID-19. The effect of these were mainly in Malaysia, and you have seen that Malaysia is one of the largest producer and exporter of palm oil. The element that was hit is labor. Palm oil is a labor intensive crop, and when COVID-19 came, most of the countries closed their borders because of this crisis. And with closure of borders, most of the people who work in these palm oil plantations are foreigners, so they couldn't come. So production was affected by lockdowns and then border restrictions. From farmers to factories, freight handlers and retailers, the crisis caused huge upheaval and triggered soaring levels of demand. One big casualty was this industry, palm oil harvest. The world's second largest producer. Yields went down to near 40-year low after the closure of borders to migrant workers who usually come to work in these plantations. At the start of the pandemic, oil was being sold at 500 sterling pounds a ton. A year, it jumped up by 50%. Today, it is almost 1,300 sterling pounds a ton, pushing up the cost of manufacturing everything that uses it, from cakes to biscuit to cosmetics to shampoo to washing powder. So it has pushed so many products up. The stocks to use ratio, a gauge that is used, a gauge of health of global vegetable oil market, has been falling for 8 years, from about 16% in 2015, the equivalent of 50 days of supply, to about 12% or 44 days. So COVID-19 is partly to blame for the problems. And this is where the problem started. Malaysia and Indonesia could not supply the demand, and given that the production now has gone down, the prices of cooking oil and other treated products started going up. And now drought in South America and Canada, then the war in Ukraine, all these events came to push the prices of cooking oil up. Another important event is the Indonesia ban on export of refined palm oil. Indonesia, as we have said, is one of the largest supplier of palm oil. So when this ban was effected, it deprived the global market of a commodity, and this was a big deal. So question has been, why did Indonesia effect this blanket ban? According to the Indonesian Palm Oil Association, the local production of crude palm oil fell in 2021 compared to 2020, even as global demand surged. When demand increases, as we learn in economics, when demand increases and supply falls or remains constant, all else being equal, prices rise. And that is exactly what happened in Indonesia. In April 2020, a ton of Indonesian crude palm oil was fetching around $545 on the European market. 2 years later, that jumped to $1,700. This has been good for exporters and for Indonesia's current account. Booming global demand for commodities that Indonesia has in abundance, such as coal, palm oil, has reversed persistent current account deficit and placed the currency in a relatively solid position as U.S. Federal Reserve begin raising interest rates this year. But roaring commodity export market presents a kind of paradox, because while it benefits exporters and current account, the Indonesian government does not want domestic consumers to pay the global market price for these commodities. A key priority for the government is to ensure that the price of staple food, staple goods that is, such as gasoline, electricity, rice, and cooking oil, remains stable and affordable. Certain types of gasoline have already seen a price hike, and the government is especially sensitive right now to further inflationary pressures. The problem is that this creates a dueling incentives for key factors. Political interest of the state in keeping domestic prices low is at odds with commercial interest of palm oil producers and exporters, who want to sell them as much palm oil as they can at the highest price the market will support. Something has to give, and clearly the government believes that palm oil companies chasing export profits is diverting supply away from the domestic market, where the profit margins are lower. This has caused the price of cooking oil to surge, and shortages and holding our widely reported earlier this year. So the government want to protect its citizens, because the exporters and producers want to sell the products outside where the prices are higher. To bring the price down, the government first tried to implement some regulatory fixes, such as export quotas, domestic market obligation, and price ceilings for cooking oil. but these have been rushed and confusing. They did not bring the price down fast enough, and as millions gathered to celebrate the end of Ramadan, the government felt it needed to be seen taking more decisive actions and finally announced a blanket export ban. Commentators also saw this as meant to send a message about the power of the state to discipline markets when it is in the national interest to do so. It echoed actions taken earlier in the year where the coal exports were banned to ensure a sufficient supply was available for domestic power plants at below market prices. When commercial interests are at odds with the political and national interest of the state will intervene to protect these interests. The blanket ban has seen be lifted, a move that could ease a tight global market and relieve some of the pressure of food prices. Indonesia President Joko Widodo said that the decision was based on the current supply and price of cooking oil and in consideration of 17 million workers employed in the palm oil industry. So Indonesia was justified to implement the blanket ban to protect its citizens, but analysts predicted that this blanket ban would not last for long because of other issues. So now it has been lifted. Government say that it was doing so because it has stabilized the prices of cooking oil in the internal market, and also it was considering the plight of 17 million workers who are employed in the palm oil industry. So with this lifting of the ban, we might see some we might see the prices coming down probably marginally. Also, the situation is improving elsewhere. In Brazil, they are expected to have a record soyabean harvest in this year 2022. Total production of the plant is forecast to be 138.8 million tons. These are 2.4 or 2.4% or 4.5 million ton increase when you compare to 2021. According to the data from the systematic survey of agricultural production for November published by the Brazilian Institute of the Government and Statistics IBGE. US soyabean output for the marketing year 2022-23, which is between September and August, is also expected to reach a record high of 125 million metric tons on the back of an all-high time acreage forecast, market analyst said, which is likely to ease supply concerns. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, March 31st forecast for 2022-23 planting intentions, soya acreage is said to increase to an all-time high 91 million acres, which is sizable acreage shift from fertilizer-intensive corn. So, rise in fertilizer prices have pushed farmers to plant more soybeans, and it's expected that the production from this region will increase, and that will go a long way into solving the current cooking oil crisis. The trend for U.S. soybean yield has hovered around 51.5 acres in the recent year, analysts say. So if this trend holds, then we will see a record beans harvest, which will be over 125 million metric tons. For the prices of cooking oil to probably come down, weather is an important element. We expect that the prolonged drought that has been happening in Brazil, Canada, and also other weather effects will ease, and with this, then the global supply of vegetable oils will rise. Also, other countries that produce vegetable oils, talk of sunflower, are expected to increase their production so that they can counter what comes from Ukraine and Russia. We have African countries that produce sunflower. Tanzania is one of the leading. You have Uganda, we have also Kenya and other countries. If they increase their supply, then they can meet their local demands and also export some. And this will help in easing the shortages that we're experiencing currently, and bring down the prices of a commodity that is very important as far as cooking is concerned. So these are some of the factors that are leading to rise in cooking oil prices. We have mentioned the drought that is happening in different parts of the world, mainly in countries that produce soya and sunflower. We have mentioned the Ukraine Russia war, countries that produce 60% of sunflower, which is one of the major vegetable oils. So when this disruption comes, then we expect the prices of other vegetable oil sources to increase. Then we have COVID-19, which affected Malaysia, which is the second largest producer of palm oil. So with the production coming down due to restrictions that were brought to curb the spread of COVID-19, then this has had an effect. We also mentioned the increased use of biofuels. So most of the palm oil has gone towards production of biofuels, an alternative to fossil fuel. So with this demand, then there has been a shortage. Then the blanket ban on palm oil, although it has been lifted, to lead to escalation of prices. So with increased with the lifting of the ban in Indonesia, also with ease of restrictions as far as COVID-19 is concerned, with good weather in areas which have been affected by drought, and then with the solution of the Ukraine-Russia crisis, we expect that the prices of cooking oil will go back to normal. So thank you for watching this video. You can watch other videos that we have made on different topics. If you have not subscribed to this channel, I request you to do so. Like the various videos that you have made. Leave a comment. Let's know your thoughts about the various topics that you have discussed, and also to be notified of the various videos that we'll be uploading, hit the notification bell. So thank you and welcome for more videos.